Assembly back to order. And yes, you can finish your sentence, but then let's come back to order. And I'm calling on the Reverend Donald McCorkindale. He's got some updates and information before we continue.
Thank you, Moderator. The Selection Committee nominations have closed, and we now bring 20 names to serve in that capacity. One item of business already requires that they meet, as does the business that we're currently on may give them a job to do. So the Selection Committee members will be Moira MacDonald, convener, Sandy Horsburgh, vice convener, and my apologies for the missing R in your name, Sandy. Pauline Waby, Jonathan Fleming, Terry Peterson, Mark Malcolm, Isabel McDermott, Joanna Love, DCS, Julie Rennick, Crawford Gillis, Fiona Shaw, Jane Barron, Michael Goss, Neil Glover, John Cook, Jim Donald, Matthew Phillip, Susan Cord, Kath Chambers, and Donald MacLeod. The Selection Committee will meet at lunchtime tomorrow in the Senate room. As you head for the mound, don't go through the arch, but take the door to your right. It's the Selection Committee. When we reach the Legal Questions Committee business today, at the close of that business, we will receive, or be invited to receive, the petition from St Andrews Bowness. We are maybe losing a little time, and I would just remind you that I might pop up at some point and suggest that we restrict 5-minute speeches to 3 minutes, but that's up to you. Thank you.
Thank you. We move back, and we have another amendment, and the principal clerk will read it out in the name of Peter Johnston.
Yeah, is that correct? Oh, that was some feedback there. Anyway, hope everyone's had a good lunch. Here we are. We've got an amendment in the name of Peter Johnston. Amend Section 2 by deleting 2024 and substituting reporting by 2024, failing which by 2025.
Yes, and those bringing the overture are very happy to accept that. Is the Assembly happy to accept that? Okay. So we move to hearing closing from Mark, and then we will hear from the convener. Mark.
Moderator Mark Malcolm 189. When my middle child was 3 years old, she was asked by her mum to put on her jacket, or rather I'd asked her several times to put on her jacket, and after a while, with no difference being made, her mum turned to her and said, "Did you not hear what your dad said?" To which a 3-year-old replied, "Oh, sometimes when Dad speaks, it's just blah-de-blah to me." I had a slight anxiety that anything I said before was blah-de-blah to some. I maybe didn't hear some of the things that I'd said, so I want to reiterate, just so that there is no confusion, because it's obvious that sometimes things can be lost in translation moving from west to east. The important thing that I want to say is this, is that the overture, and I can't say this strongly enough, is not stopping anything. It is not delaying anything. It is not stopping the process where things are good and right either. There is still all that work to be done and still on to get on with. A review is not a stop or a hindrance or a barrier. So in the nicest possible way, it's not blah-de-blah. There's no stopping. We still carry on. But just maybe, rather than plan A, like Doug's plan B, there might be a plan C or a plan D. I was asked a question earlier about whether it was mission, and we deliberately did not want to be critical in any way of the plan put forward, but I think we would generally agree that using the word mission plan is stretching that word to its utmost extreme. It is more in like a ministry allocation scheme and somehow using our mission with that. And so absolutely I agree with 007, whose name I forget, I think it's Reverend Forsyth. I agreed entirely that anything that is done has to be that platform and springboard to mission. We've got good news to tell, good news to share, lives to be transformed. The overture in many ways is a step back to 2019 and dealing with the unfinished business of the Special Commission and the Radical Action Plan. And it's asking to finish it well with the right review and reflection. And rather being anxious about special commissions, over the years, special commissions have served the church really well. They have not distracted from time. They have used up a small group of willing people's time and allowed the church to know its mind better. The overture is there because there is that need to rebalance the local and the national. The overture is there because there is that need to empower, to liberate, to energize, to excite the local congregation. In Glasgow Presbytery, as I imagine every presbytery has been at the sharp end of unintended consequences of a one-size-fits-all plan that has then created particular pain and particular angst. If I was to ask for a show of hands of how many come from happy congregations at the outworking of the plan, it might be revealing. I would love you to vote for the overture, and I would love it if somebody came back in 2024 and 2025 and said Plan A was the best plan. What I wouldn't love is if we don't give the opportunity to review, to reflect theologically, and to reflect morally, and to reflect practically, and to run at 100 miles an hour, but in slightly the wrong direction. The overture is not stopping anything. I would love to know the angst that is there at an overture that is so benign, that simply asks to review and to reflect. I would love to know what sores it touches on to create any angst. But what I would like to be able to offer on behalf of Glasgow Presbytery is some air to breathe, to reflect, to do something maybe slightly differently, and to come back with some good answers. Even if that answer was, see Plan A, it was brilliant and the best one that we had. But if it's not, please let us ask some questions for the sake of the local church. Thank you.
Call on the convener.
Thank you, moderator. If that's for me, I'm busy. The overture states that the church attempted a similar process in 2011 and resulted in no clear growth. The difference then was there was no direction or plan to move the church into mission. The Radical Action Plan and Special Commission of 2019 have instigated the reform we now implement at every level of the church. No one is exempt from it. The Assembly Trustees expressed concern about how the process has impacted on all our congregations because we are all involved in it with you, in our own congregations too. It has felt harsh and rigid by congregations members, presbytery planning appraisal committees, as well as national office staff. This level of reform was and is difficult, and unfortunately we get fixated trying to preserve what is now no longer sustainable. Care needs to be taken to ensure people take ownership of change and engage in the process of change. This is the concern of the Assembly Trustees. The majority of the plans have been confirmed, Glasgow's just this past week, with one or two small caveats. They've done the hard and necessary work to get consensus. What would the acceptance of this overture do to the fairness of the planning process to those who have consensus, which has been built in already to the review process of the Presbytery planning system? The next generation of newly trained ministers are waiting to begin their ministries in a settled situation, even in Glasgow. To suggest the planning process is revising the role of ministry and word and sacrament without reference to the nature of call and without understanding the nature and purpose of ministry of word and sacrament is a perception that is incorrect. The call to ministry, the role of word and sacrament has not changed. It is the nature and purpose of mission that has altered for us. It is what follows next, and the Faith Action Programme will help us support that, working towards ministries' apprenticeship schemes, the recruitment of Martin Fair and Eleanor McMahon, ministers of long experience in the church, answering God's call to support development of new pathways into ministry and recruitment, development of a new integrated training programme, Kay Cathcart and our wonderful team leading. The convener of the Theological Forum sits on the Faith Action Programme leadership team. Theological reflection and guidance will be assured. Review and reflection, along with presbyteries, will be an integral part of the Faith Action Programme leadership team as well. I assure you, Assembly, your voices will be heard. The overture cites Nehemiah. Nehemiah provides a case study of transformational leader who was personally involved in making vision become a reality. Ideas. When he introduced his vision and plan, it captured the imaginations of the leaders of Jerusalem. They believed his plan would work. Resources. He created an organisational structure to assign the work. Planning. He developed a comprehensive plan, reviewed and analysed the situation. People. He recruited the leaders of the city to do the work. He had feedback mechanisms in place to learn about progress. Implementation. The wall was just a pilot project for Nehemiah's plan to restore the nation. Resistance. He was also fiercely opposed. But he celebrated the short-term success of completing the wall with a great celebration. Sustainability. The wall was built in 52 days, but the city was large and the people were few. To sustain the vision and plans Nehemiah had started to implement, the city needed ongoing leadership. Likewise, the church, our church, needs leaders who can articulate a vision, gather resources, put together a plan, recruit the right people, execute the plan, overcome resistance, communicate what's going on, and sustain the momentum. This is where we are now. The overture comment agrees with the direction the Assembly trustees are taking. Setting up a commission at this stage is premature and will bring further delay. I want you to hear today, review, review, review is built into the entire process going forward. But also hear this today as well. Growth will not come for the church as it exists today. A costly special commission of 7 people will not alter this fact. The pain of change is a result of not having tackled enough of the serious issues we have faced and have articulated for decades. We are at this point of transition and change, and we need to move forward with enthusiasm for the good of the church. No further delay. The church would be better served, like the people Nehemiah led, who replied, "Let us start rebuilding." So they began this good work. They rolled up their sleeves, ready for the good work. Moderator, I encourage the General Assembly to resist this overture and embrace instead the task of all of us together, rolling up our sleeves and being involved in this good work going forward.
Thank you both. We are going to move to the vote. It's going to be an electronic vote, and so I will ask that William let us know how that's going to work.
Thank you, Moderator. Michael, Mayor 567. The Moderator has called for an electronic vote. When the vote is opened, Commissioners attending in the Assembly Hall will vote using the Bluetooth handset they were issued at the start of the Assembly. Those attending remotely will use the Assembly Hub, ensuring you have clicked the red Current Live Debate button to ensure voting options appear on your screen. Once the voting is opened, Commissioners will have 30 seconds to cast your vote. You may change your vote as many times as you would like, only your last one will be counted. And regardless of how many times you press your voting button, only one vote will be registered. Following the vote, the combined figures of those utilising the Bluetooth handsets and the Assembly Hub will be calculated and announced by the Moderator.
Yeah,
in this vote, you are voting for or against. The wording is, instruct that a special commission of 7 persons appointed by the selection committee be formed to consider the missional and pastoral impact on the planning process instituted by...
Could you just halt? That's not quite the right wording, Michael. Please. We're just trying to get it up onto the screen so that Commissioners can hear, and then we'll read it again. Apologies, Assembly. It's amazing, just a wee word, and it's quite tricky. Can I just read out what we've got? I'll just read it out. Okay, it literally is. We're looking at an in and a for, all right? So we're not trying to be, it's nothing odd about it, I promise. So I'm just going to read it because there's an in it that shouldn't be in it. That's clear, isn't it? Right. Section 2, as amended. It's instruct that a special commission of 7 persons appointed by the selection committee be formed to consider the missional and pastoral impact of the planning process instituted by the Presbytery Mission Plan Act, Act 8, 2021. Assess other possible approaches, consult with the Assembly Trustees, General Trustees and the Faith Nurture Forum, and report with recommendations to the General Assembly in 2024, failing which by 2025. Thank you, Assembly.
Option 1 is for, option 2 is against. The vote is now open. There are 10 seconds remaining. The vote is now closed.
For 156, against 194, the overture falls. Oh, wait a minute, what was it?
Just section 2, Moderator.
Sorry.
When they'll move
Just
to section 3.
2. Apologies. Just section 2.
So we now move to section 3.
We now move to section 3. Section 3. I'm going to read it out.
No,
Thank
I've got Liam.
We've got Liam Fraser wishing to speak. Thanks, Liam.
Moderator, I speak now in my capacity as convener of the Theological Forum rather than my own personal capacity. And I thought it would be helpful before we come to debate this particular section of the overture, just for the Assembly to hear some background to this. First of all, thank you to Mr. Malcolm for sharing the overture draft with us before it was submitted. And also for taking on board some of the comments we had about it, which resulted in the bodies being instructed being changed and also the timeline changing. So we're grateful to see this and for him to take those comments on board. Coming to the substance of the section itself, there are a range of different views on the forum with regard to this overture, and particularly the instruction for this report. Some people felt that this work looking at the decline of the church had already been done in the past, and there was no need to actually revisit this once again. Other members of the forum felt that by looking at what had gone wrong, it might be a bit backward-looking and might be too negative and not focused enough on the future. Other people, however, thought this would be a good opportunity to take stock of how we got to this point and then to try and summarise in a coherent and concrete way the positive steps moving forward. So there are a range of different views on the forum with regard to this, and therefore it really is for the Assembly to make its mind about it. I'd also maybe stress as well the comment we had from Dr. Stevens, I believe, earlier on as well, that the forum is getting a lot of stuff this year, and therefore this is another thing, but it's very much for the Assembly to decide. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else wishing to speak. Let's go for it. Section 3. Will we call for an electronic vote? I don't think we need to do that. Let's see how it feels. Section 3. Yes, that's fine.
Moderator, just to say that the sections of deliverance that have been passed by the Assembly from this overture from the Presbytery of Glasgow will be recorded in the deliverance of the Assembly Trustees. Thank you, Moderator.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. We move back. So we move now back to the report. And we're moving to section 3, as in the print. And can I say to Glasgow Presbytery, thank you for bringing this overture and for all the work that you have done. Thank you. Section 3, and I'm having to move over here, Nathan McConnell.
Nathan McConnell, 328. Thank you, Moderator. I think our accents are in common, which is good, but I might have accumulated a different one. But I did, in proxy, wear, taking into consideration the beautiful green that you're wearing, my green trousers. And for that reason, I'm thankful to be up here. And I want to thank, first and foremost, the pivotal work that the Assembly of Trustees is doing. And thank you to the convener's team for their support in this motion. Moderator, I am not speaking on this. I'm speaking on something different. I apologize.
Oh,
that is not what I'm intending to speak on, so I'm
all right,
not
well,
sure.
then feel free to sit back down.
I will step back with my green trousers. Thank you.
Is there anyone else on section 3? Section 3, then. Okay. Thank you. And feel free to pop back up when we get to where you are. Okay. Section 4. I've got Amy Foster, Robert Allen, and Iona Gove. Mike 23?
83.
83. Mike 83. Excellent.
I'm on. Thank you, Moderator, for calling me, and thank you to the convener for the encouraging presentation earlier on, before lunch. I wish to just make a quick comment and say that it's quite clear from reading the report that we as a church must change. The statistics and the financial situation outlined in the report were rather alarming. As a young person in the church, sorry, I just realised I haven't said my name or number, Amy Foster, 582.
582.
The statistics and financial situation outlined in the report were alarming. As a young person in the church, I feel I'm very much in the minority, and I'm sad that many others my age consider the church as irrelevant. I long for the church to change so that my friends feel it can be for them. But, moderator, I'm concerned by the direction of travel that the report seems to be leading us on. As someone with a degree in business management, I recognise much of the language used in the report, and it reads like a business plan. But are we a business, or are we a church? I believe we need to go beyond the business outlook or the business plan, and we need to look towards what I'm coining the Jesus plan. In section 3 of the report, the 3 priorities are identified. However, I would question where the mission is in these priorities. Where is the Holy Spirit calling us? Is it really a priority to improve governance over reaching out to those who do not yet know Jesus in our schools, our local communities, our priority areas, and our workplaces? In our prep session last night, the youth rep sitting behind me had a big discussion about this, and we wanted to encourage the Assembly to consider if these suggested priorities are placing our trust in the right place. Are we trusting that our God is bigger than our budget deficits, declining numbers, and business plans? Do we trust that the Spirit is powerful enough to work through us so that more people are brought into a relationship with Jesus? Is God leading us to fulfill a business plan and fix the problems of the declining numbers and finances? Or is God leading us to be the church, to be the body of Christ participating in God's mission in our communities? I would urge the Assembly to refocus these priorities that will guide our decisions for the next season so that mission and our calling as a church is more explicit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Robert Allen has disappeared from my screen. Okay, and that's correct. We move now to Iona Gove.
Thank you. It's Iona Gove and it's 583. I want to comment on the 3 suggested priorities for the Church of Scotland from my perspective as a young person. When I read the priorities, it appeared to me that they are riddled with fear, and that causes me concern. I will be training to be an RMPS teacher, so will one day be teaching young people about the Christian faith. I'm concerned that what I will be teaching them about things such as following Jesus' example and loving one another, serving communities, reaching out to people in need, being Jesus' hands and feet in the world, will be met with confusion, as what they see the Church of Scotland focusing on will not be matching up with what I will be teaching. As I see it, the fear we have for the future for declining finances and membership numbers is causing us to forget who we are. I believe we need to follow the theological forum's leading and remember who we are as a church and what we are called to be doing and to set the priorities accordingly. As said in the book of Psalm, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Our priorities should be built from our understanding of who God is, rather than on fear. I do have hope for the future, and I'm looking forward to playing my part in the change that is needed. But my hope is founded on Jesus, rather than on strategies that come from fear. Why do we want to instill fear in future generations? Our God releases us from fear, and I believe our stated priorities should be the same.
I have no other names on the screen. Going to see how this... Oh, but there you are.
Moderator, number
Thank
33,
you.
my number is 436. My name is Donald Walker. I had a heartfelt phone call from a good friend from one of the small islands in the to the north. I'm not saying which one, either the Orkneys or the Shetlands. I know which one because I've been there and I've worshipped in the church. But this person was desperate for an answer regarding her closing church. The closure is being done, as she said, by strangers, and she felt very much for the local people who are faithful people and who've been going to that church for many, many years, as well as their forebears.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I clarify whether how this fits in?
I have
with
a
section 4?
comment and a question to the convener. I can come now. On the wording, it says development and growth. So it's really on that.
Okay.
And so my question is, how can you, as a convener, be sure that such congregations that are feeling abandoned and who have no real hope of progressing very far, how can they be assured of being pastorally supported and taught and empowered to carry on, perhaps within homes? Is there specific teaching and advice that is being given or that will be given to ministers and to church workers to help such people in the future as they stand, as they say, alone? What advice is being given, whether it's teaching on worship, pastoral care, whatever, because I feel this is very, very important. I've had the privilege of working in Africa twice, and I know exactly what both of these churches that I've worked with would have been doing, and that is teaching, empowering, helping, advising. Thank you, Moderator.
Okay. Thank you. Convener.
Thank you for your very heartfelt question. And I do, as a convener of Assembly Trustees, understand where that's coming from. There is a lot of pain because of what seems like the faceless part of closing churches. I'm going to suggest that this is part of local leadership within the presbytery area to help resource what you're asking for locally. We have good ministers in places, and deacons and OLMs and ministry support workers, all in place to help with the very situation that you described. We also have the ministry support team through the Faith Nurture Forum who can help and assist with that going forward. So I want to assure those who feel that way that it will be available to you. But I also want to encourage presbyteries to ensure that their people understand the pain that they're going through and the support that you can give locally as well. We are setting priorities here in order to move us forward in a new direction. I'm asking you all to help us with that in your local areas, and you'll be able to do that too, Donald. Thank you for your question.
Okay. Thank you. Section 4. I'm going to call for an electric vote. That was very half-hearted. So I'm going to call for an electric vote on that. Thank you, Michael.
The moderator has called for an electronic vote. Those in the hall will use their Bluetooth handsets. Those online will use the Assembly Hub, ensuring they have pressed the red Current Live Debates button. The voting will be 1 for the section 4 as in the print, or number 2 against. You'll have 30 seconds. The voting is now open.
He didn't.
Seconds remaining. The vote is now closed.
For 249, against 62. Section 4 passes. Can I please ask commissioners to, when we do a vote with feet or hands, to really, if you're in favor, let us know. Otherwise, we're going to spend time doing electric votes. Thank you.
Moderator, as you and others know, we are running a little behind, and I would like to suggest that we amend the terms of Standing Order number 95 and limit all speeches that would otherwise be 5 minutes to 3 minutes. The other exceptions would remain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if the spirit moves you to be less than 3 minutes, then that's a lovely thing. Lovely thing. Section 5. Okay. Section 6. Thank you. Section 7. And online. Thank you. Section 8A. We are amending Section 8. Okay. It's in, this is in the name of the convener. This amendment, would you like to speak to it, or we? I don't think we need to.
Moderator, has everybody seen this in writing? It's in the order of proceedings. Would you like me to read it? It's a wee... Oh, Dr. Browning has said read it. I shall read it. So it is Section 8. It's in the name of the convener, and it's adding an amendment, and it reads as follows. And also add the following further amendments to Regulations 2/2022, Section 1, at the end of paragraph 14E, add those raised for local mission posts and associated local mission programmes subject to 14F, close quotes. 2, see what I mean? You're riveted, aren't you? Add a new paragraph, 14F, open quotes, funds raised exclusively for local mission posts and associated local mission programmes, provided that ministry here, as defined under paragraph 16A, is met, and that year on year the congregation maintains payment of their ministry elsewhere, and shared activities, contributions as defined under paragraph 16B and 16C, respectively. Now, the treasurers in the room will get it.
Since it's in the name of the convener, then obviously the convener is happy with that. So Section 8, Section A8 as amended. Well done. Well done. And online. Good deal.
Okay, there's a new Section 9.
We have a new section. Oh, yeah. The new section.
No, it's 9.
No, it's Section 9. We want to get this right, so hang on a minute, and I'm going to push the mute button and have a wee conversation. We're on Section 8, as amended. No, that was the one. We've done that.
And then, whose name? Robert Allen.
Gotcha. All right, we have a new Section 9 in the name of Robert Allen. Robert, welcome.
Thank you, Moderator. Moderator, I'm bringing new Section 9 here. If we're to assist stretched ministers of today, and if we're going to entice people into ministry tomorrow, then we need to give them some idea of what is expected of them, and to be able to share that with congregations, what is expected of ministers in this bold new era. This will not be an updated basic tasks of ministry from the 1990s, but we need to surely paint a picture, and hence part 1 of this new section. Regarding part 2, I welcome the increase in stipend this year, and I'm thankful for this. But we can't just wing it each year. The former bodies of the Maintenance of the Ministry Committee and the Board of Ministry worked tirelessly for ministers to be paid a good and reasonable stipend. But I fear we have lost our focus a little in recent years. And section 17 of the report talks about the pay and grading review of central services. And whilst I do not agree with central pay structures, at least they have been reviewed, even with external consultants brought in. We do not seem to have developed a strategy about stipends. What would be reasonable pay for ministers? What comparisons should we make? Can we simply say that we are well paid in comparison to some clergy in other churches? Or can we say we are underpaid compared to the teaching profession, for example? We cannot simply look at how much we have in the bank and offer what we can afford at the time. We need to have a system. We need to have an aim on how we determine stipends. So let's call for this to be done. This would also help stretched clergy and future new recruits. And finally, to part 3, the trustees are telling us that ministers are stretched, even more so covering vacant charges, even more so as we create mega parishes, whilst we somehow continue to cover the whole of Scotland with 60,000 worshipping folk. The least we can do is to review the situation and provide comprehensive support for our present and future ministers, and in that vein determine what else may need to change in the church as part and parcel of that support. Moderator, I move this new section. I thank the convener for his assistance in reshaping this section, which I believe would be acceptable to him, and I hope to the General Assembly.
Happy to. Convener, are you happy to accept? Okay. The convener is happy to accept. Is the Assembly happy to accept? Thank you. Great. We're good to go. Okay. Back to section 9. Back to section 9, as in print. Okay. And online. Excellent. Section 10. I don't see anybody wanting to. Okay. Excellent. In the room is yes. And online. Thank you. Section 11.
Press my button here.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Neil Glover, 44231. I would like to invite everyone in the Assembly today for lunch tomorrow at 12:30 in the Storytelling Centre, where we will be launching the Seeds for Growth Fund. The intention of the Seeds for Growth Fund is to see the growth in the church through the founding of new worshipping communities. Now, there's a great news story in the church. Last year, in the annual congregational returns, 400 churches ticked the box to say they had a new worshipping community in their church, or at least 400 occasions. Now, it has been known, moderator, for the annual return of the congregation to be slightly tinged with optimism. And so 2 of our staff members in the Faith Action Programme, Leslie Hamilton-Messer and Steve Aisthorpe, phoned round every single one of these folks to kind of just check what was going on. They actually have 5 criteria that you had to tick. And they discovered that according to their much stricter criteria, in the Church of Scotland, in the last few years, there has been the founding of 200 new worshipping communities, which absolutely stunned me when I heard that. We're so aware of the decline, we're so aware of the losses, and yet 200 new worshipping communities. And actually, I think those congregational returns were telling the absolute truth. Let's call it 400. Tomorrow at the Seeds for Growth Fund launch, we're going to be talking about how the fund will support those and new communities. And I would ask Commissioners, Moderator, to be thinking about your ideas. We will fund training, We'll look at equipment costs, we'll look at building costs, we'll look at salary costs, 2 levels, up to 1,000 or up to 10,000 this year, to fund new worshipping communities. When this is launched on June the 1st, we would love to be inundated. And if you need help with your form, please contact us and we'll work with you. Fantastic team just sat behind me here, and also the committee members. So that's tomorrow at lunch. Please come and hear more about that work. And finally, Assembly trustees. I'm not an Assembly trustee, so I'm going to say this. Well done, you. That was a bold move, taking 25 million and saying we are going to invest that in new growth within the church. And you deserve to be wholly commended for that. So thank you.
Thank you. And we have a question from Andrea Boyes, and I believe she is online.
Thank you, moderator. Yes, I am online. Andrea Boyes, 464. I hope that's the right number. It's to ask just this long-awaited fund, a bit of back here, a long-awaited Seed for Growth fund, and just wondered if Bill was planning on doing it was 100 or so commissions.
Andrea, we're struggling to hear you. I think it might be your connection. Maybe, yeah, there you go. Like, try turning your camera off. Sometimes that works.
How does that sound? Is that better?
That's much better. Thank you, Andrea.
I'll put on my radio voice now. I just long-awaited Seeds for Growth fund, and I'm really looking forward to making an application. But I wonder if Neil would, if there's anything that's going to be available for the 100 or so folk that are commissioners online this year. Will something be recorded?
Good question. Thank you for your question, Andrea.
The answer, moderator, is yes, we're looking at online content. I don't know if all of it's going to be available for the Assembly this year, but we've been working on various bits of online, mainly to encourage folks in the church. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you for your question. Section 11. And online? Okay, thank you. There's an amendment in section 12 in the convener's name.
Thank you, moderator. The amendment is amend section 12 by adding at the end and also add the following further amendment to regulations 4/2022, 1, delete paragraph 12.
Does the Assembly need the convener to explain, or are you happy to accept? Happy to accept. Okay. And online? Not. Oh. Okay. Okay, so 12 as amended. Okay. Thank you. Excellent. Section 13. Okay. Okay. And again, there are two amendments to section 14. So call on Grant Barkley.
Grant Barkley, 166. Moderator, section 13.5 in the report makes it clear that the key aim of the Faith Action programme is to equip and support the local church in its mission. I do welcome that. I'm sure many commissioners do, but it seems at odds with this aim that presbyteries are neither formally nor effectively represented in the membership of the Faith Action programme leadership team. Section 13.14 makes it surprisingly clear, I think, that those who are nominated but who are not selected and who are certainly not appointed by presbyteries, and I quote, have freedom to represent their own views. It's not clear to me how the apparent tension between these two principles of close working with presbyteries on the one hand and the individual views of nominees who don't represent those presbyteries on the other can be squared. I think this is important because this team will influence the support which is given or not given to presbyteries and to local congregations. The leadership team will also identify what areas the Faith Action programme should be devolved to presbyteries, although I do notice that it doesn't say that resources will also be devolved to enable this work to be done. And so I think that there's simply too much optimism and too little clarity of process in the statement at section 13.16 that, and again I quote, it's hoped the prominent role of presbytery nominated members in the new leadership team will give increased impetus to this. It looks to me as though significant issues will be decided without any direct input from the presbyteries themselves. As others in this church have said in other areas of work, nothing about us, without us, is for us. I think that applies to presbyteries too. And this is a matter which has potentially significant consequences and appears to be insufficiently considered. There's too great a risk, I fear, that in representing their own views, as has been made clear in the report, members of the leadership team may propose the wrong things in the wrong ways to presbyteries. And so I raise this now so that if the Faith Action programme leadership team is agreed, that the important matter of representation will not be missed. I do apologise in the middle of the afternoon, moderator, for delving deep into the workings of the Constitution, and that's why the amendment is quite long. It relates to the bullet point, which you'll see at section 4 if you go to appendix 3, and that's just how these things have to work, moderator. But the simple change I am making is to remove almost all the wording from that bullet point and replace it with the single word presbyteries. And I think others are going to speak against this, and I would simply say that if you hear the counter-argument that we need to have diversity rather than representation, I would argue that that is a matter of balance. We heard the Lord High Commissioner on Saturday note with significant approval the democratic polity of our church. For me, democracy involves representation, which enables participation. If you want presbyteries involved in this programme, then allow them to nominate those who represent them. And can I just say as well that Glasgow did nominate two, and our successful nominee, in my view, and I do hope I'm not mansplaining, added to the diversity of the leadership team. We are delighted that Dr. Linda Watt is going to be serving as our presbytery nominated member on the team. But we would have appointed her, and all I plead with is that the Assembly gives presbyteries their place and allows them to make the appointment. I have sadly not arranged for a seconder and hope that the power of my orator, or at least the strength of the argument and your compassion will allow somebody to second my motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And in regards to diving deep into the Constitution in the afternoon, we would have expected nothing less from you. Call on Julie Rennick, then Andrew Gardner and Neil Glover.
Thank you, moderator. Julie Rennick, 239. Speaking not as a presbytery clerk, but as the convener of the nomination committee. When we were set the task of populating the Faith Action Programme leadership team, the leadership team in particular, we were asked to include presbytery representation. I asked, what does presbytery representation mean? And during the process of deciding what this meant, I had conversations with the convener of legal questions, with the principal clerk, with the administrative trustee, with Neil, who was working with the D10 group. We battled it out to work out what it meant, and what we arrived at was that We wanted to make sure that we had good representation from each of the presbyteries, but it was also still important that the nomination imperative to ensure good balance and good diversity was equally important. Not one over the other, they each have equal value. Thus, we contacted each of the presbyteries and asked them through their own nomination process to produce up to 2 nominees. To my recollection, 3 of the current bigger presbyteries produced 1 nominee, the rest produced 2, and the presbyteries that will become the Presbytery of the Highlands and Islands, if I've got that correct, worked between them all to find one person that they had confidence in, and so they produced 1 name. We were looking then at the other members of the leadership team, the convener, the vice convener, and the ordinary members, to ensure that this enormous part of what is a very big body was balanced between men and women, between elders and ministers. We had geographical diversity because we had people from all over the country in their presbyteries. Because other people from presbyteries were also nominated in other areas, there are some presbyteries that have 1 or 2 and others who have 3 or 4 members across the whole programme. We feel that if we remove the nomination process from this side of the creation of the Faith Action Programme leadership team, we lose something. The committee takes great pains to cover its remit, which is to ensure balance, to ensure diversity, to ensure that everybody is represented, whether you're old or young, whether you're a minister or an elder. And we feel that this is really important, and we would be very sad if this imposition came upon us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take Andrew Gardner and then Neil Glover, and then I think we'll go to a vote.
Thank you, Moderator. Gardner, 322. Moderator, at the General Assembly of last year, the Assembly Trustees and the Nomination Committee were charged with the task of, in the formation of the Faith Action Plan leadership team, to find nominees from Presbytery. And so we've discharged our duties this year as the Nomination Committee, as requested by the General Assembly. The other thing to say about the Nomination Committee is that we do our task with care and rigour and kindness. We are entrusted to have all of the nominees before us so that we can place people carefully in the committees that serve the General Assembly. And I think if we remove the Nomination Committee from this process, then we are entrusted as a committee by the General Assembly to do our job well and carefully. And if we're removed from the process, then are we not, it seems to me that we're not trusted to do the job well. So I would resist Dr. Barclay's amendment here and ask that you keep us in the process of recruiting people from presbyteries into the Faith Action Leadership Team programme. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you.
Neil Glover, number 442. Firstly, I'm really grateful to Dr. Barclay because he pointed out that section 1314 does require a bit of clarification. To be clear, the purpose of presbytery representatives is to take the views of presbytery on the issues that the Faith Action Programme leadership team will consider, and then to make sure that those are properly represented in the Faith Action Programme leadership team from all the presbyteries. So it's a real move to make sure that all the voices in the church are heard. I was part of the group which put together these proposals, and there was some pressure to say, well, let's have a smaller group, or let's have representatives for one for every 2 presbyteries. But we said, no, it's really important that every presbytery has a voice. As Dr. Barclay said, what's about us without us isn't for us. But we were also conscious that there was a possibility that just by pure accident, every presbytery would nominate people from similar demographic groups. And one possibility is to just ask presbyteries to kind of get together and kind of sort that out. But that lacks the transparency that I think we need here. So we said there's an extra step whereby, firstly, no one can come into this unless they've been nominated by their presbytery. So the people coming into this, first of all, have to enjoy the confidence of their presbyteries. So the representation part is already there. And then, because this is such an important piece of work, the whole Faith Action programme, it's really important, for reasons we've already discussed this afternoon, that we have diversity. And so the nominations committee provide that on behalf of us all. I have to say, having worked with them this year, I'm incredibly impressed with the thoroughness at which they do this. So it's that final extra step, which, to my mind, does not diminish any of the ability of this person who's come from a presbytery to represent that presbytery, but it also ensures that the group as a whole is properly diverse for this very important work. Thank you, Moderator. And so I would urge the Assembly to resist the motion from Dr. Barclay. Thank you.
Okay.
Moderator, I'm looking where to stick my card in.
Okay, there's
they don't go
no
anywhere
card.
now. All right, it's some time since I've been physically at Assembly. Mackinhill 144 at microphone 31. I'd like to speak in support of my colleague Grant Bartley's amendment. I hear what has been said by the nomination committee, and I take what they have said and their work very seriously. But I think that's something that can be done in concert with presbyteries. We can be told what type of people and posts are required. We can be told about the needs, the diverse needs of the constituency. And as the nominations convener said, this is a large body of people of which we are speaking about no more than 12 presbytery representatives. The new structures of the church were meant to create devolved, autonomous presbyteries that were more tightly integrated into the central structures of the church. I've had many conversations with Professor David Ferguson, who produced the 2019 report, and he has, although it's not part of that report, oftentimes said to me that perhaps trustees could be appointed by presbytery. The idea is to get integrated, joined up thinking flowing from local context into the centre of the church, and people representing the needs and the concerns and the aims of presbytery as an express intention of their remit. Now, that, I think, can be done, and with all due respect, taking into account all the needs for balance and diversity. But if we intend for there to be a new relationship within the church between the central structures of the church and large, expanded, autonomous, responsible presbyteries, then we need this type of engagement. It is part of the programme of reform. It is long overdue, and I commend Assembly support Dr. Bartley's proposal.
Dr. Barclay, you have a right to reply, and then we are going to hand back to the convener to close.
Grant Barclay, 166, very quickly, Moderator. Might we try cooperating with presbyteries, and might we even try trusting them? Thank you, Moderator.
Convener.
Thank you, Moderator. I too wish I had Grant Barclay's rhetoric as well and his knowledge of the Constitution. I always rely on the clerks for that insight and knowledge. We do trust you. The whole Faith Action Programme leadership team proposal to bring everything together is part of that trust going forward. It's part of a plan to take us into the new future that we crave in the church. Looking back at something the Nominations Committee said last year, each presbytery has members who serve on national committees, and it would be a positive move if each of those could be invited to speak to their presbytery. There is a sense, though, in which the national and presbyteries could be better connected through whoever from a presbytery is serving nationally and liaising with their presbytery. We are all in this together. I seek that. I assure you I seek that as a convener of the Assembly Trustees in going forward for the good of our church. We need that multi-way communication, and whoever serves on this on this group brings their own perspective and the wider perspective of their presbytery. We considered long and hard, the team, the D10 SPT team, the strategic team, considered this whole question very, very carefully indeed. There's a suggestion here that we didn't. That is not the case, I can assure you. A team of experienced ministers and elders of both Presbytery and the General Assembly wrestled with this and concluded a role akin to a commissioner at the General Assembly rather than as a Presbytery rep. That's you and the experiences you bring from your presbyteries, doing the same through the Faith Action Programme team for two main reasons. Meeting preparation. The range of topics, work streams, matters that the Faith Action Programme leadership team will be called upon is huge, involving presbytery and considering all these in advance in order to give a position to their representative is impractical. Discussion and decision tackling. When the Faith Action Programme get together, it will be important to harness their joint knowledge and experience. This will include what the Faith Action Programme members know of the situation in the views of the presbyteries and local congregations. They are there to help forge strong overall connections with the presbyteries and the Faith Action Programme. As I said earlier, moderator, your voice will be heard, and so I ask you to resist this motion and allow the process to go through. The Nominations Committee did a fantastic job with limited resources to fulfil the obligations to get people for the Faith Action Programme leadership team. I trust you. I hope you trust me. Resist this motion. Thank you very much.
And there is a point of order from Brian Kerr. Brian?
Moderator Kerr, 231. It's a point of order on what the implications of approving this would be, because we would be deleting wording out of the remit that the Nomination Committee worked to. The Nomination Committee will be bringing on Thursday the names of the Faith Action leadership team, which includes 12 people representing presbyteries. It would appear to me that reading this, if Assembly were to actually approve this, then those names would not be able to be brought because they are not then appointed by Presbytery, and therefore the Faith Action leadership team, programming team, which is meant to start imminently, would not actually be able to start in the way that it is meant to be constituted. And I just wonder that making this change at this late stage would actually mean that this important part of the church's work would not be able to actually start. And it's just, if my reading of this is correct, is this then kind of competent for us to agree when we would then be having half a body appointed to start a full job in just a few weeks' time?
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Kerr. Suggestion here from the clerks with the point that Brian has just raised is that if Grant, where are you, my hello, convener of legal questions, is that we actually just add in another amendment to your amendment, and so that if it's passed, it doesn't take effect until next year. Is that a pragmatic solution?
Moderator, just to say, I'm not speaking as convener of legal questions. No, I'm speaking entirely on my own part, and I didn't quite follow that proposal, but since it came from the Principal Clerk, I'm absolutely prepared to trust her and agree with that.
Thank you very much, Grant. We'll sort the wording out.
Do we need to sort the wording out before we do a vote? I think we do.
I think if everyone's happy that they know it's for next year.
Is everyone, okay. Is everyone happy that this would be changed to being in place next year? Okay. All right. Okay. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Moderator,
We'll get it in
Conky
writing.
378. Conky 378. I don't see the problem that Mr. Kerr is suggesting. If the wording is changed that these members will be appointed by presbyteries, presbyteries can very easily appoint them in their June meetings, and they can take up their duties by the end of June. So I don't see what the issue is here.
Do you want to respond to that? We want to make sure we get this right, so give us a minute. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yes. I'd said this morning that sometimes music goes to places that words can't, and there are a lot of words happening here, so we're going to sing. We're going to sing. Okay. I'm going to hand over to Colin.
One way of ensuring the presenter stays awake. La, 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 la. Listen to the silence. Listen to the noise. Listen to the silence. The Spirit noise. Listen to the silence. Listen to the noise. Listen to the sound of the Spirit's voice. Okay.
Don't you all feel better? Ready. we have an amendment that it seems everyone is happy with. Am I right, yes. Presbytery Clerk? And I'm going to ask the Presbytery Clerk to read it.
Thank you very much, Moderator, and thank you, Assembly, for your patience. We have agreed with the mover, Grant Barclay, the following amended section 14, taking into account that solution to the point of order from Mr. Kerr about delaying this to 2024. So amended section 14 reads, adding at the end, subject to amending the fourth bullet point entry in section 4 of the Church of Scotland Faith Action Programme, leadership team's structure and remit at Appendix 3 to take effect from 2024 and without affecting appointments made this year by deleting the words from General Assembly through the Nomination Committee to leadership team and programme groups and replacing them with the word presbyteries, so that the fourth bullet point reads 12 members appointed by presbyteries. There will be one such member for each presbytery or presbytery grouping. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. We are going to definitely take an electronic vote, and I will ask Michael to explain how that's going to happen.
Those in the hall will use the Bluetooth handsets. Those joining online will use the Assembly Hub. If you are in favour of the new section in the name of Dr. Barclay, you'll press number 1. If you are against, you will press number 2 or the button against. You will have 30 seconds. The voting is now open. Ten seconds remaining. The voting is now closed.
For the amendment, 204, against 129, so the amendment passes. And now, as amended.
No, it's not. We've got a second amendment.
Great.
In the name of the convener.
Okay, and now we have a second amendment in...
I feel your pain, whoever that was. Sorry.
In the name of the convener.
So this is Second Amendment to Section 14, the name of the convener. It's just a change of rephrasing. So Section 14, by adding at the end, subject to amending point 6, about the Resource and Presence Programme Group, where it appears in Section 4 of the Appendix to Appendix 3. sorry. The appendix to Appendix 3 by deleting the existing wording, ensuring the business viability of the Israeli entities and substituting have oversight of the work of the church's establishments in Israel. Thank you, Assembly.
Is the Assembly happy with That amendment, okay. So now we take the amended and online, great.
Then we take the amended section 14.
Okay, now we are taking the amended section 14. Is that approved?
Yeah, as a whole. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And online? Okay. Section 15. I don't see anybody there. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we've got it's section 16. We have a question from Linda Watt. Thank you, Linda.
Dr. Linda Watt,
Thank you.
Commissioner 205. I do have a question for the convener, but since I was named in the floor of the Assembly just a few minutes ago, I want to try and reassure Dr. Barclay that I will in the next year do my best for the Church, which includes the Glasgow Presbytery. My question really is about the work of the Ministries Commission. Convener, can I ask you why in the 21st century does the Church retain the employment practice of tied housing? And I'm talking about manses. Most sectors which employ graduate professionals, which is what ministers of word and sacrament are, moved away from the system of tied housing last century. And of course, I'm talking about the sectors of education and health.
Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Watt. This question is not competent for the Assembly Trustees. We would want to take that question, or is it?
We're already conversating. They're saying it's not. This is about constituent committees, the leadership team.
I think it's
an employment question, pension question.
this is about pension schemes. This particular, but a question's not always.
But what's the question in relation to manses and tied manses?
It's not about pension schemes.
Okay.
It's about employment practices.
Right.
Go ahead, sorry.
Can I continue?
Of course you can.
Well, I was talking about the sectors of education and health which got out of this practice last century. Hospital consultants, of which I was one, and I was a psychiatrist. And in fact, pre the NHS, I would have been expected to live in the psychiatric hospital and work there. However, since that time, the only matter in my employment was that I lived within 10 miles of the hospital. So I'm not quite sure why in the 21st century we're continuing with that employment practice of tied housing.
Okay, she's finished now. If you just say that
It's coming later.
if you just say
Good. Thank you.
Thank you for the question and for the clerk's advice. This is already being dealt with other motions coming to the Assembly in the rest of the week. So can I invite the Assembly just to wait till then and for the mover of the question to come and see the clerks as well. And that would maybe help with that situation. That's not to ignore the question, but it's to deal with it in the proper place. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener. Section 16. Okay. And online? No, we're still waiting. Sorry. Okay, thank you. Section 17. Okay, thank you. Section 18. It's a new section, for new section 19. And this is in the name of Brian Kerr.
Moderator Kerr 231. Thank you. My new section says, note with alarm the research which reports that black ministers Ministers of colour and ministers from an ethnic minority are being overlooked or asked not to officiate at funerals, but to give way to white Scottish ministers. Instruct the Assembly Trustees, through the work of the EDI Group, to highlight this issue, urge the Faith Impact Forum to liaise with relevant public bodies and funeral directors to invite their intervention, and encourage presbytery clerks to raise awareness of this issue in every parish. Moderator, if you've read the research, and Commissioners, I hope you have, it is frightening that this is happening, and it is happening. Just a month or so ago, I received a phone call from a funeral director asking if I would conduct a funeral for someone. And the person wasn't a resident in the parish, so I said, well, why me? And they said, well, the minister next door's not available. I said, well, why that minister? Because they weren't a resident of their parish either. Well, the person who died was quite specific and said that they wanted a Scottish minister to take their funeral. We have ministers around us from all parts of the world in our small part of the Presbytery of Forth Valley and Clydesdale. We have ministers from 5 or 6 different countries beyond Scotland, ranging from Australia and America, South Africa, India, and parts of the African continent as well. To know that all of those colleagues were not acceptable or somehow qualified or somehow didn't fit to conduct somebody's funeral was, to me, absolutely appalling. As a denomination, we ought to be standing up for our ministers and calling this sort of behaviour out. And calling it out for what it is. It's racist, it's xenophobic, and it has no place in our nation and certainly no place in our church. Thankfully, I was able to let other colleagues know that this was the case and left it with them as to whether they conducted the funeral. But I think we do need to highlight this issue. It's not acceptable for a funeral director to ask, and nor is it acceptable for a funeral director to turn round and say to me, well, the person was old and fixed in their views. I don't care. It's unacceptable. It's wrong, and we as a church ought to be saying that, ought to have the courage to say that, and ought to stand by our ministers and those who experience this form of racism on a regular basis. Not in our church, not in our name, and we ought to be saying that loudly and proudly and reminding people that we are a diverse church and we stand for equality. Moderator, I so move.
I see someone trying to, are you trying to speak?
Yes, Moderator.
Excellent, okay, thank you. Alan Steele.
Moderator, thank you very much indeed. 203 Alan Steele. It's just a comment in light of what we have just heard. We as a church condemn discrimination. We as a church abhor all forms of discrimination. And I don't think there should be any controversy in that statement. But we need to be very, very careful before we pass resolutions or motions that are based on isolated incidents or even examples of some isolated incidents across this country. The evidence presented does seem to be one particular example. I am a lawyer by profession and a committed Christian, so I don't need to emphasise, I hope, that I'm certainly not racist. But people are free in this country to make certain decisions I would suggest that somebody, an elderly person, a younger person, may well be free to express that they would like, dare I say it, a Scottish minister presiding at their funeral, in as much as they would be free to express a desire to have a minister from any other nation preside at their funeral. So for that reason, with great respect to the gentleman who has brought this amendment, I would ask the Assembly to resist supporting this because we need to sometimes, as Christians, dare I say this, be tolerant of intolerance. In some, okay. I'm trying to express the point, really, that yes, we do have some in our nation that we need to bring them on board, and condemning any preference that they express is not necessarily the way forward. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. Thank you. We have two people wanting to speak. We've got the Very Reverend Dr. Ian Greenshields, and we've got Darren Jallan. I think you were here first, so go ahead, and then we'll...
McInnes 184. Thanks to Brian Kerr for making that point, and I agree. It's completely appalling that that happens. I don't think passing acts is necessary in this case, though, because we do already have the tools in place to deal with this. There's a territorial ministry on every piece of ground in Scotland, and there's a parish minister or an intermoderator attached to that parish. If you want the services of a minister and you're not a member of the church, you need to go to the minister in that territorial area. So much as I completely sympathise, and I find it absolutely appalling that this goes on, I don't think it's necessary to pass an act. And equally, you're not going to pass an act that's going to catch everything, whereas the existing act to do with territorial ministry covers it, and intrusion covers it. Thank you, Moderator.
It's okay. Yeah. Could we get your name and number?
184 McInnes. 184.
184 McInnes. Okay.
Now we go to our friend.
All right. Going to...
Moderator. It's now a gentleman over there.
Oh, I didn't see you. Oh, that's... Oh, sorry. Wrong one. Can I ask folk to please register that they want to speak? So it's now Darren Jallan. Thank you. And then it'll be...
403, Darren Jallan. I want to speak in favour of the amendment that Brian's put forward. I completely reject the idea that just because we've got one, or actually two, because there was another case in the report that was mentioned, cases of this happening, that we shouldn't try and address it formally at General Assembly. This is something that we need to make sure we nip in the bud if it is something that is happening. Every single one of my ministerial colleagues is equally valid in their ministry, in their humanity. And for somebody to turn around and say, I do not want you officiating at my funeral because, and incidentally, as a white English minister who this has not happened to, I suspect this is nothing to do with Scottishness and more to do with whiteness when it happens. We cannot allow that to happen, and we need to have a united stand to make sure that we have a way forward to avoid it happening in the future, and that we have a way forward to address it. We cannot be tolerant of intolerance, because that is to be tolerant of denying people's humanity, and that is not the way of Jesus Christ. That is not the way of his gospel. So I am wholeheartedly in favour of this amendment.
Thank you.
Ian Greenshields, 571. I would like to support this amendment. I had a situation when I was clerk of Dunfermline Presbytery where somebody approached me on a similar situation to say that the undertakers very clearly were not, in fact, didn't want to go ahead with the funeral on the instruction of the family because the minister was black. It was as simple as that. It was nothing to do with Scottishness. The minister was black. I immediately contacted every minister in Presbytery. I told them about this. I warned them not to agree to take the service under any circumstances, and that the matter should be reported to the police. I really think it's as serious as that. It was a matter not of not Scottishness or anything like that. He was black. That was sheer and utter discrimination, and we should not in any way be supporting something like that as a church.
Thank you. I've seen two people standing at microphones, but you're not on my screen. So I'm going to start. Got Andrea Boyes has a question, but then we have Fiona Bennett.
Just also in response, yes?
Yes.
So, sorry, I thought I had tapped you into the
That's
screen.
okay.
Apologies.
Can you
Fiona
get
Bennett,
your name and number?
509, and I'm here and I'm at mic 53, representing the United Reformed Church. I just wanted to share in common experience the United Reformed Church in response to our reflection on the legacies of slavery. Beyond apology is looking at reparation, and one of the things we're doing in reparation is that we are committed to being an anti-racist church. And one of our steps within that is that we are seeking to roll out, and this is one of our proposals for our General Assembly, anti-racist training with an understanding of systematic and structural racism as well as individual racism throughout the denomination. This is not a problem that is singularly the Church of Scotland are experiencing, but as we work in England and Wales and in Scotland, and particularly in some of our communities and churches within England, which are in areas which are hugely culturally diverse. One of our churches has people from over 40 different countries, far less cultures within it. And this is something that we are instinctively very, very aware of. So just to be aware that as anti-racist training is something that we are committed to. And if there are ways we can work together in that, if that is useful to know, then know that that is happening.
Sorry. Okay, we have a question from Andrea Boyes. A question? Online.
I'm online.
Thank you. It's a question, Andrea?
Andrea Boyes, 464. I wonder if Brian, as he's proposed this amendment, if he would consider making it a male white instead of just situating or looking at colour, because this is also about sex. And I know other people that have been affected in this way, where it's been a male minister that's been asked off for funerals or other services.
I don't know where Brian...
Moderator Kerr 231. Well, this puts me in an interesting place. Thanks, Andrea. Absolutely see where Andrea's coming from. Absolutely. Passionate that it doesn't matter who a minister is a minister. However, I think in terms of the EDI report that we're referencing, I think we need to keep this tight. The report references black ministers of colour and ethnic minorities. I think I would be happier to keep it like that. But obviously, I think the church has had statements throughout its history on sexism, and we absolutely have to fight that. And I, for one, would be happy to work with anyone who wants to work on that. But I think for this, and I'm looking at David Bradwell and Morella, and I think that they're in agreement that we should keep this tight in this case, but obviously it's for Assembly to decide.
Thank you, moderator. Oh, that was a bit of an entrance. Oh, hello. Anyway, as my wonderful deputies pointed out, the other thing to bear in mind in respect to Mr. Kerr's motion is this is in relation specifically to research, which is already referred to on the website. So I think it is in order to keep it separate.
Andrea, are you happy with that answer to your question? Sure. Procurator.
Moderator, I would simply like to add that by way of reassurance to funeral directors, I think if they were to say to a family, well, we can't do this, they would be complying with the Equality Act. I think they'd be getting into great difficulty with the civil law if they undertake obligations to not provide ministers with particular characteristics.
Thank you. Okay. Now, as Andrea posed that as a question, I'm going to let that stand as a question, and we continue on with Brian Kerr's motion. We have two more people to speak. I'm going to call Kwame, and if I'm mispronouncing your name, apologies. Got Patricia Whitaker and Kwame Ahagali. Okay, so we'll go Kwame first and then Patricia.
Thank you, Kwame Ahaliga 220. I would want to thank Reverend Brian for that bold comment, and I recommend him for that. I personally haven't experienced that, but I will not explain it away, as the attempt, unfortunately, has been by one of the speakers. Opinions, ideas, wherever they come from, whether in the public, that has to do with the church, should be shaped by the gospel or challenged by the gospel. And this is the church. This is the Church of Scotland. Racist ideas, ideas that are divisive, that do not give life, which are not life-giving, should not be tolerated and also not be allowed to be explained away. This morning we heard mansplaining, and I thought I also sat here and heard white-splaining. White-splaining the experiences of black and brown bodies away. And I don't think we can do that in the context of the church. The gospel should challenge us to confront such opinions with a strong prophetic voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And now to Mary Whitaker, apologies. You've popped up on my screen as Patricia. But
no
to
worries.
Mary, thank you.
No problem. I think when somebody mentioned the Equality Act already, and obviously that includes myself and my experience as a deaf person, as a deaf minister who uses British Sign Language, when I'm asked to, you know, but through either email or text, and when they say, can you phone me, or you can't phone me, you have to text me or email me, people just panic, they don't know what to do. But that's the Equality Act, and that's equality, and people just have to accept that. You know, people are disabled, and you have to adapt to the ways that match that person.
Thank you. We have one more person on the screen, and then I think we will call this to a vote. So, Evaristo Mazedska.
Thank you very much. Black ministers like myself.
Sorry, could we get your name and...
Oh, sorry.
And, no,
102, Evaristo 102. Black ministers like myself go through a lot. And these are some of the unsaid struggles of serving as a minister. You walk into people and you've got to put up a brave face, knowing fully well that you are there, but you're not there. It's very difficult to be present and yet absent, to feel lonely in a place that's so full of people. And as a black person, it's very hard to listen to someone to try and explain my pain, my rejection, my humiliation away. All you can do is offer support. And don't, for lack of a better word, don't dare try and say, you know what I'm going through. You've no idea. You've no idea. But all you can do is acknowledge what I'm going through. Thank you.
So we move to this new section 19. Does the Assembly approve? We are moving now to a new section 19 in the name of Nathan McConnell. So I'm going to ask Nathan to come forward. There we go.
He's back.
Yep.
Thank you, moderator.
You're very welcome.
First, let me say thank you to the pivotal work of the Assembly Trustees, and I want to thank the conveners team for their support in reviewing the motion that you will hear. Moderator, there is an innate dynamic tension and beauty in the Presbyterian form of polity, which demands of each of us the necessity of checks and balances. It is the same tension that brings us to commend in a very real way the work of the Assembly Trustees and the early beginnings of the EDI and the Conduct and Culture Group. This commendation brings a sincere responsibility to these groups, and the Assembly of Trustees as a standing committee of the General Assembly is subject to these forms of accountability, just as the same of every committee, subgroup, presbytery, session, and court of the Church. This responsibility is based on profound theological fidelity to Christ and to each other. And as other subgroups whose remit shape the Church's theology, the EDI at times will delve into theological topics which will need careful and sageous contemplation. It is with the original intention of this motion comes to the floor and makes the request that the Assembly Trustees, EDI, and the Culture Conduct enter into collaboration with the Theological Forum on projects of a theological nature, and instructs the Assembly Trustees to report back regarding its association to this body in 2024. So in the spirit of theological fidelity and Presbyterian collegiality, I ask that the motion be moved. And
the convener is happy to accept. Is the Assembly happy to accept this? Thank you, and thank you very much. Okay. Now we go to section 19 as in print. Surely that caffeine would have kicked in by now. Oh, there are two names on the screens. We've got Brian Sherritt.
Yes.
And Craig Dobney. Brian.
Dr. Sherritt, 569. I was, about 30 years ago, I proposed to this assembly that we sell 121 George Street and buy more modest premises, but my proposal was rejected, and I see we're still discussing the question yet. But what puzzles me is there are so many now redundant church buildings in Edinburgh, must be, as there are everywhere else in Scotland with the Presbytery plan. How is it that by selling, if you were to sell 121 George Street, you must be able to fetch quite a big sum of money in such a prime site? How you wouldn't be able, with that money, to refurbish one of these redundant church buildings for the purposes of the church offices, especially as you're going to be cutting back church offices. You're going to, some people will be working from home and all the rest. I can't understand why this is not really being kind of ruled out as a total option, considering that these redundant church buildings are unlikely to be very quick in getting sold the way things are, there's going to be so many buildings in the market and they're not going to get sold. So I want to know why this is being ruled out altogether again.
Thank you. So this is a question, convener.
Thank you for your question. We appreciate it very much to be able to explain. This has been on the Church's agenda for quite some time. Indeed, it was looked at in 2017 and 2018, and then the Special Commission of 2019 suggested that it would be something that we should also look at then with a view that the time was probably not quite right. Pandemic kicked in and things have changed. We've gone to hybrid working. We have undertaken condition surveys of the property to assess the building and identify planned maintenance regime over a 10-year period. This has been a priority for the facilities team that are there, and as instructed, we engaged with the Presbytery of Edinburgh to determine whether relocation of the church offices to an existing church building within the Presbytery of Edinburgh might be feasible. Searches on 22 church properties using the agreed scope of 20 minutes walk from the rail station were looked at by the National Office Project Group, with initial results suggesting that a number of these church properties are either too small or too complex in terms of listed status and cost of conversion to provide a realistic office space. It's important for the Assembly to note that the national offices currently extends to over 60,000 square feet. Even consolidated, we will still occupy 40,000 square feet of office space, meeting rooms and storage. This is substantially larger than churches that we might try to fit into. It's still on the agenda and we'll make the right decision at the right time. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, convener. Craig Domney.
Yeah,
Dobney, sorry.
Sorry, Moderator. Dobney, yes. Craig Dobney, 317. I think you've answered most of my question anyway, convener. I was just going to ask, have you looked into, obviously, private premises as well? I was on the transition group for the Presbytery of Perth, and we ended up having to get private premises, which has taken a while, and I take into consideration how big a task that is for 121 George Street to move into private accommodation for a building that size. But I think it would be good for us all, in the current circumstances that we are going through locally, having to give up our buildings, the Presbytery's having to give up many of their buildings, that 121 George Street could be shown, or the Central Church could show and display through their efforts to do something about 121 George Street, that they're kind of in solidarity with all the rest of us who are having to give up buildings and find ulterior accommodation for bringing the gospel to the people of this country. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you, and I think the convener had answered the question that had been looked into. We're going to move on. I do want to encourage the commissioners we really do need to crack on, and I am not in any way trying to shut down important discussion or debate, but I get to go away to the reception. You're going to be here. So I'm just putting it out there. I'm just putting it out there. Okay. We move then section 19. Is this about section 19?
Yes.
We just passed it, sorry.
Could I ask the question anyway?
If it's a question, there.
Yeah, it's just a quick question relating to 121. What conversations have been had with ecumenical partners about sharing office space?
Okay.
Sorry, it's 332, Peter Phillips.
Thank you.
Yes, again, I welcome the opportunity to assure the Assembly we've had those conversations too.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Section 20. Thank you. And online? Sorry, I need to rush you, Michael. Sorry about that. Section 21. Thank you. We have a new section 22, and that is in my Yes, you need to. We'll let the principal clerk read it. That's great.
It doesn't like me. So we have a new section 22 in the name of Carl Irvin, and it is up on the screen, and I will just read it for the record. Insert a new section 22 and renumber. In order to achieve net zero by 2030, instruct the Assembly Trustees to assess carbon emissions from national church travel, both international and national, determine options to reduce this, agree an annual carbon budget for the national church, and report to the General Assembly in 2024.
Is the convener happy to accept that? The convener is happy to accept. Is the Assembly happy to accept that? Excellent. Thank you so much. And good online as well. Deliverance as a whole. Okay. All right. Okay, we're having a wee confab here. We're going to move on to the Assembly report or the supplementary report, and then we'll do the deliverance as a whole. So we move to receive the supplementary report. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Online? Okay, thank you. Section 2. I do. Sorry about that. Ian Aiken, apologies, I missed you. Question.
Moderator, I think that was previous. I don't have anything to say. Sorry.
Okay, apologies for that, Ian. Okay. So we've got section 2 and online. Great. Okay. Section 3. And is everything? Sorry, yes. And online, thank you. Phew, take a deep breath. Yeah. And the deliverance as a whole. I think you all deserve a round of applause.